As a part of this course, you'll become familiar with Visual Studio. So we want to give you a quick little tour of the integrated development environment so you can become familiar with all of the different components. And in this way, you can become more effective and productive much more quickly. So I've got Visual Studio up here running on the window right now. And we're going to take a quick look at some of the more common aspects, the windows that you'll be interacting with, and explain how you can actually utilize some of these in your applications as we start building them. The first window that's open here right now is what we call the designer view, and you can see that I'm looking at a page called hubpage.xaml. Now this particular application is what we refer to as a universal application, and it's intended to be deployed on a Windows 8.1 computer or tablet, as well as deploying it on a Windows phone. So what we're looking at here is the graphical interface for that type of an application, and in this case you can see it's kind of framing it for a Windows tablet. So it could be a Microsoft Surface or any other tablet that will run Windows 8.1. This gives us what we refer to as a split view. So in the upper portion we have the designer view, which is showing us what the user interface of the application will look like. And down here in the lower portion, I will resize so we can see some of the XAML code. And this is the actual, what we refer to as XAML, which is the extensible application markup language code that actually is used to define that user interface. Now, you'll get a chance to work with some XAML as the course progresses, but most of the time we're going to be focusing on the C# programming language. But this is just to give you an idea that some of these components, as you start working with the practice files, will involve some graphical environment work. And so this is just to familiarize you with what we're looking at from the GUI perspective. Another window that you become familiar with is our Solution Explorer window here in the upper right-hand corner. The Solution Explorer window contains what we refer to as a solution, which essentially is really a culmination of all the projects that you might have within your solution or your application. There are folders, so we can see that there's a folder structure here. The root is Hub App 1. Underneath the Hub app, we have what's known as a project. So this is actually the Windows 8.1 project, which will run on a desktop or a tablet PC. And then we have the Windows Phone Hub app. So these are components that are really specific for those platforms. There are some slightly different components and layout parameters and properties that you'll find in there. And then we also have another folder here, which is basically the shared components for the applications, assets, some common class libraries and things like that. So the Solution Explorer is where you will work with the files for your application itself. And as you can see, as we click on the individual components within the Solution Explorer, you might notice it down here in the Properties pane. Some of the information is also changing as well. So you'll interact with the Properties pane as well to configure different aspects of the application or the files that are a part of it. Now, we're looking at the Properties pane here from items that we're selecting in the Solution Explorer, but also note that the Properties pane will be available for items that we select in the user interface. So this is a little text block that we have selected up here, and you can see how the properties change to allow us to configure in kind of a visual way some of the properties for that specific text block itself. We've got the ability to change the text information in here, modify some of the appearance values over here as well. Or if you want to, you can actually make the changes directly in the XAML itself. So we've got some of these here are specific namespaces for page titles and header information that the code of the application uses. But you can see the text, what we have for great application, which is written here in the top, is put in here. And then we have a bunch of other components or attributes of that XAML that define that specific interface element. So again, you work with Solution Explorer for your files, property to set properties on the different aspects of your application as you're working through it. Let's stay up here in the designer window again for a second, and I want to show you one of the next more common windows that you'll be using, especially a lot in this particular class, and that is the code editor. So if I expand my hubpage.xaml, I have a hubpage.xaml.cs, which is my C# code file. As I open it, you'll see that we have C# code that is in the code editor window. So this is where you can view the code, you can type new code, you can edit existing code right directly in this window. You'll see that there's color highlighting for keywords within the editor window. And Visual Studio also gives us the ability to utilize something which is known as IntelliSense, which is a great helper for code productivity. So as an example, if we type the keyword this and put the dot notation at the end of it, you can see that Visual Studio's IntelliSense now pops up all of the available properties, methods, and events of that specific object. So it makes it a lot easier for us to know what we might have to choose for a specific property or a specific event that we want to work with. And then as we fill this in, we can see that if we don't complete it correctly, we will get this little red squiggly underline. That's another feature of Visual Studio that helps tell us when we haven't completed code correctly or there's something wrong syntactically with the code itself. And a little error window will pop and tell us that only assignment call, increment, etc. can be used as a statement. And mostly that means we just simply haven't completed that statement. So, that's a little bit of IntelliSense. That's a little bit about how some of the visual representations in Visual Studio will pop up and help you as you write your code itself. Also, as we're working through creating an application, we have a couple of extra windows that are over here on the left-hand side that are not displayed by default, and we can bring them up. So let's go back here to our graphical portion, and I wanted to show you in the Toolbox tab, as we expand this, you'll see that we now have a bunch of components. These are visual components that we can add to our application, so we can visually design the app by dragging and dropping. Again, you'll see some of this as we go through the class, but mostly we're going to focus on code, but I just wanted to make you aware of this specifically. We also have the ability, if we're in a code window itself, to work through the Server Explorer. And the Server Explorer tab allows us to perform all kinds of extra little bits and pieces for our applications. If we have an Azure account, we can create cloud services, mobile services, virtual machines, and websites directly from within Visual Studio. Now, obviously, you'll need to be signed in to your account to be able to do that, but once you have that subscription and you're signed in, you can create all of these components on Azure itself. If you're going to connect to databases, you can create data connections here, and you can also connect to servers for different functionality. You can take a look at the services that are running on a server. If you want to do remote debugging, you can connect to those servers from here as well. So that's the Server Explorer tab and the Toolbox tab. Now we also have some windows that will pop up down here on the bottom. You'll see output and you'll see error lists that show up here. But what I want to do is very quickly drop in a breakpoint, and you'll learn about dealing with breakpoints and debugging applications a little bit throughout the course. But I wanted to bring up the other windows for you to see. So as I click on the Start Debugging tab and we bring up our application window, you'll notice that once the code, this initialized component line is actually entered, the application pauses on that, so that's my breakpoint. It'll stop for me. And then I wanted to show you these other windows that are available down here. We have the Autos window, which will basically provide you with information on all of the variables that are in scope at that time, so hence the reason Auto. It will show only variables that are in scope. Local variables that are within a method or whatever scope that you're working with can also be displayed here. You also have the opportunity to create watches on certain variables so that you can see when a variable changes. Great opportunity to help you through debugging your application. We've got a call stack window down here. We can see where we have breakpoints in the application itself. We can issue commands directly from the command window. We can see outputs as the debug is actually working, so it tells us that the application deployed correctly, or if there's any errors that happen to pop up. We'll actually see those in the error list here as well. In any of these windows that are down here or on the right-hand side, the left-hand side, you'll notice these little thumbtack pins. You can click those to auto-hide those windows and they go away, so you get more screen real estate back here for your editor window or your visual designer. And of course, they're all tabbed down here at the bottom, so at any point in time you can bring up whichever window you specifically are looking for, and again you can pin it, in which case it will remain here as well. We'll talk more as we go through the course about the different aspects of the Visual Studio integrated development environment, how we deal with some of the buttons up here for debugging as we step through code to help solve problems, what we can do on building the application and different things like that. But this was just designed to get you comfortable with the Visual Studio environment as the tool that we recommend you use as you start developing your code through programming in C#.